side. Say, neighbor, oh neighbor, I am a winner. To another side. Say, neighbor, oh neighbor, I am a winner. Now turn around to the person behind you, in front of you, give them a praise 5 and tell them, we are winners. The objective, every message, every teaching must have an objective and a purpose. The objective of this message is to encourage, equip, and empower you and every believer in Jesus Christ to develop a winner's mindset and a champion's will. The purpose of this message is to encourage and equip and empower every believer to develop a winner's mindset and a champion's will. The goal of this message and series is to encourage you to identify your losing habits. You aren't necessarily losing because of racism. You aren't necessarily losing because people don't like you. You aren't necessarily losing because you're too young or too old. Most of us are losing because we have a loser's mindset and we have developed losing habits. And so it is the purpose of this message to encourage you to identify your losing habits. Now, what losing habits am I talking about? Losing talk and losing thoughts. Since death and life is in the power of the tongue, what comes out of your mouth determines whether you're a loser or a winner. If you're always talking about, I'm broke, guess what? You're going to be broke. If you're always talking about you're going to be tired, you're going to be tired. If you're always talking about, I can't keep a man, well, you'll never keep a man, all right? Because death and life is in the power of the what? That's the book of Proverbs. And so our goal is to encourage you to identify your losing habits of the way you think and the way you talk. It is to equip you to take them off. Everybody say, take them off. You got to get rid of those bad habits. Now, let me share something with you. It's hard because most of us don't even realize we have losing habits because they are generational strongholds. They have been passed on from mother to daughter, son to father, generation after generation, and we have become so used to losing that we have become survivors. One of the reasons that we are, every generation of us, is so caught up in stars is because our life is so pitiful that we want to identify with somebody successful rather than taking the responsibility to be successful ourselves. So it's much easier to get a weave like Beyonce than it is to master your craft and be the best at what God has created you to do. It is easier for some people to be a survivor than it is to be successful because of generational strongholds that have equipped them to think like a loser and to take on the habits of losers. Touch your neighbor and say, but I'm going to take it off. All right? And to empower you to put on the winning ways of Christ-like champions. That's the purpose of this message. Now, on Resurrection Sunday here at Bethel Owings Mills last week, we discovered that liberating love wins. Touch your neighbor and say, liberating love wins. And that message was from John chapter 21, verses 15 to 19. Today, I would remind you that 1 Corinthians 13, everybody write down 1 Corinthians 13. In fact, turn there if you will. 1 Corinthians 13 is the love chapter of the Bible. And before you say you're in love with somebody, you first better fall in love with God. Because God who made you is love. And once you learn how to love God, we shared with you last week, then you better learn how to love yourself. Because people who don't love themselves cannot love anybody else. For Jesus tells us that we must first love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our mind. And then God says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Let me help you. If you are going out with somebody who is physically or emotionally abusive of you, you aren't the problem. They are abusive to themselves. They just take it out on you. Can I get a witness? And if somebody that loves you will never abuse you, because if they love themselves, they would never abuse themselves. Touch your neighbor and say, you better understand what love is. And 1 Corinthians chapter 13, everybody got it? 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is the love chapter of the Bible. Let me make sure that we got a good class in here in Owings Mills. 1 Corinthians 13 is popularly called what chapter of the Bible? The love chapter of the Bible. And if you skip down to 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 8, it gives us great insight into what love is and what love is not. What love is and what love is not. It says in verse 4, love suffers long and is kind. Now, I need to explain what that means. Love suffers long does not mean you let somebody beat the hell out of you in the name of love. Love suffers long does not mean, I was watching, there's something called the repo game. And I was getting my nails done yesterday, and I was watching. Anybody here seen the repo game? And what the repo game is about is that you owe money on your car, and they come and they repossess your car. But they will pay it off if you answer 3 out of 5 questions right. So I'm sitting up there, and I'm watching, and they go to Dallas, and of course, the first person whose car they're going to repossess looks like us. All right? But he has a girlfriend of the other persuasion, and they're living together. All right? And so the problem is that she's 30 years old and she's got a job, and he's 20 years, she's 30 years old and got a job. He's 20 years old and ain't got a job. All right? And I'm sitting there saying, what kind of love is this? This isn't love, this is abuse in the name of love. Because if you living in my house, eating my food, driving my car, and my car gets repossessed because I can't take care of you and me too, that's not love suffering long, that's foolishness. Touch your neighbor and say, that's foolishness. Because when love allows your credit to go bad, that ain't love, that's foolishness. Can I get a witness? Because if somebody loves you, then they want to take care of you instead of you taking care of them. Can I get a witness? Touch your neighbor and say, I can do bad all by myself. The other side say, I can do bad all by myself. Talking about you love me. I can't do without you. No, you can't do without me except when it comes time to pay the bills, pay the rent, and pay the car note. That's not love. That's foolishness. Touch your neighbor and say, that's not what it means when it says love suffers long. Look what it says. It says love suffers long and is what? Kind. Love does not envy. Love does not what? Parade itself. It is not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. Lord, have mercy. If you're 35 or younger, you need to read that. Love does not behave rudely. It does not seek its own and is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Love, verse 7, does what? Bears all things. Love does what? Believes all things. Love hopes all things. Love endures all things. Now here's my favorite line. Love never fails. Touch your neighbor and say, love never fails. If you love God and put God first, love never fails. And when you love God and yourself, then you will not let anybody abuse you in the name of love, and you discover that love never fails. Touch your neighbor and say, love never fails. But my favorite line here is in 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. Skip down to 1 Corinthians 13 and 11, which shows us that many people are spiritually immature. and must go through a process of spiritual formation that leads to spiritual maturity. Do you know why so many people don't go to church? It's not because they don't love Jesus. Most people love Jesus. They dislike church folk. Because most church people are in church, but they are spiritually immature. Touch your neighbor and ask him, are you spiritually immature? Now watch this, watch this, watch this, watch this. This is spiritual immaturity. Everybody got verse 11? Let's read. When I was a child, I did what? I spoke as a child. I did what? And three areas of spiritual immaturity. One is the way you speak. The other is the area of understanding. I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. And I thought as a child.